Okay, welcome to Rock Docs, a podcast about music documentaries. I'm David Lizerbram.
I'm Andrew Keatts.
And as always, we were talking about a music documentary on this particular episode. Today, we will be talking about Summer of Soul, directed by Questlove from 2021.
A Questlove John.
A Questlove John, for your Mid-Atlantic fans out there. If you're listening to this when it comes out, this episode when it comes out, this movie will be Oscar nominated, which it has been, but I don't think the Oscars will have happened yet. So, we're all in suspense to see if if he brings it home. But before we get into that, first of all, we should say that we're available on social media at RockDocsPod, and of course, like all podcasts out there that you know and love, we appreciate it if you share the show with a friend, subscribe. Throw us a review.
We have it on good authority that reviews help in one way or another.
Yeah.
Algorithmically.
We don't have a Patreon, but you can send us Bitcoin or something. I don't know. Figure it out.
Right. Just one Bitcoin's fine.
Any number of Bitcoins. Yeah. We're not picky. Andy, you have a topic, I believe?
I do. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
All right. So we have discussed over the course of the season and a half of this show the role that rock docs are capable of playing as basically background, right? You put it on. You don't need to pay especially close attention to it. You can hear the music. You dial in for one segment or so. If you have people over, it's almost like having music on, right?
Right. Yeah.
All right. So I would like to introduce the concept of rock docs that are not rock docs.
Okay. Explain.
This is, I'd like to explain as little as possible because I think basically this should be open to interpretation.
Okay.
All right. So what it should be for sure is not a rock doc.
Okay.
So anything that we would clearly cover as an episode on this show should not qualify.
And is a concert film too close?
I think concert film also is too close. Concert film is like disqualified, even though it's also not capable of being included on the show.
Okay.
So it's like any other movie.
Okay.
That could play the same role in your house as a rock doc.
Okay.
But is not a rock doc.
Okay.
All right.
So let me just say Boogie Nights.
Boogie Nights is like slam dunk, number one pick. It's obviously a rock doc. In fact, we should do an episode.
Okay. So Boogie Nights and probably a lot of the Paul Thomas Anderson oeuvre.
Yes.
Inherent Vice, maybe Licorice Pizza, which I haven't seen yet.
Our friend Nick handed me a copy of Licorice Pizza, and he said it's a rock doc when he handed it to me. So I have it on good authority that it is a rock doc.
Okay. So, yeah, I hear what you're saying.
One other I would like to add is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Okay. I can see that being a rock doc.
Yeah, I think that's a rock doc. And now, changing up a little bit here, I would say Dogtown and Z-Boys.
Sure. A documentary.
Now, yeah, exactly.
Nominally not a rock doc, but...
It is a documentary, but it does feature music heavily. These are basically like music-forward movies, I guess, is what other people would call these.
Like Almost Famous is almost like cheating.
Almost Famous is almost cheating.
Right.
In fact, that's what it would be called.
Or a biopic, whatever. That's, again, kind of like Bohemian Rhapsody. Okay, it's kind of too obvious.
Yeah, it's like outside of the spirit of the question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, my 4-year-old, about to turn 5, Miles, is constantly telling me that Encanto is a rock doc.
Yeah.
Right? Is my son a liar?
Well, I gotta say, we're about to discuss a rock doc that includes a memorable appearance from Encanto impresario, composer Lin-Manuel Miranda. So I think he's got a good case to be made.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, rock docs that are not rock docs.
Rock docs that are not rock docs. If you can think of any.
Yeah. Add us at RockDocsPod.
Yes. Add us and share your rock docs that are not a rock docs thoughts, and we'll pass judgment on you. Right. Much as you are on us. It turns around. All right. Let's discuss this film that we're here to discuss. This is not the first rock doc to be Oscar nominated. Several rock docs in recent years have won the Oscar. I think 20 Feet from Stardom did, Amy. So it's not unprecedented, but it is notable in a lot of ways. First of all, Questlove, famous rock doc talking head. I believe he was your number one draft pick when we famously did our rock docs talking heads draft.
If we had any sort of scoring system attached to that draft, this Oscar nomination would have to be like a 100-yard touchdown.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay. This is his first film.
Yeah.
He's a multi-hyphenate person who does a lot of stuff.
But now, like, already on the basis of this wildly successful film, critically adored for good reason film, he's got like 6 film projects lined up already. He's basically got the next chapter of his career spoken for already.
Yeah.
Many of which are like grew out of this movie.
Right. I mean, the one that you and I talked about offline was that he's doing a movie about Sly and the Family Stone.
Yes. Which, and I understand, was basically relationships built on through this movie. After this movie came out, people reached out to him and started talking to him about some archival footage that they have. And then the last one, would not be as a director, but as a producer, he is helming a James Brown docuseries.
Right.
A like multi-part, I think it's like 6-episode full life James Brown docuseries, which I believe I can't remember exactly the context, but you discussed in the first season as something that was sorely lacking in the rock doc space.
Yeah, I think we were just asking like what artist or band or whatever should have like a multi-part series about it, like a 10-part series or something.
Yeah.
And I said James Brown, and I called it.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, go back and check the receipts.
Yes. You manifested that into those worlds, so congratulations.
Yeah, I'm sure. Questlove, my lawyer, who's me, will be contacting you.
Yeah. All right. Well, so Summer of Soul. What's the premise? This is actually wonderful for this show. Not many podcast episodes does the movie have such a capsule premise as this one.
Yeah. Okay. So, summer of 1969 in Harlem, there was a music and art festival that transpired over in a park over about 6 weekends. I think
6 weekends. Yeah.
And it featured many famous superstar musicians, as well as comedians and other people. And apparently, it was a beautiful kind of moment of peace and love and harmony. In many ways, in Harlem, and then
the world kind of forgot about it.
More or less culturally forgotten about.
Yeah.
We can talk about how much that's true.
Yes.
But that's the premise of the movie, certainly, is that like everybody forgot it happened, even like everybody was there. It was like memory hold.
Yeah.
And somehow, and it was filmed. There's great footage, and somehow that footage sat in a vault for 50 years until one way or the other, Questlove got his mitts on it, and decided I would like to win an Oscar, so I'm gonna make a movie out of this. And they restored the footage. They saw what like incredible gems they had. They went back and interviewed some of the musicians involved, as well as people who were at the festival and other people who had things to say about it. Mainly Lin-Manuel Miranda in that category, and put this together to kind of tell that story. And the first thing you see in the movie really is this slate, like the clapper at the beginning, when they're filming a movie, and it says on it Black Woodstock movie or Black Woodstock Project. Like they hadn't named it Summer of Soul yet. Yeah. But that's really the idea here. It's like everybody knows about Woodstock. It was this big thing. At the exact same time, 100 miles away, this whole other festival was happening that a lot of people went to, and it was great, and the music was awesome, arguably better than the music of Woodstock.
Yeah.
And, it just never achieved the cultural cachet. So it was kind of reclaiming that part of history, retelling that story, and in the same time, using this documentary to kind of recapitulate or retell part of Black American history at that time, the Civil Rights Movement, and what the reaction was to the space race and all these other things that were happening in that moment.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so Questlove has, the one thing that we have to our advantage right now is Questlove did a robust media tour around this movie. So there are a lot of interviews from Questlove talking about this movie.
Yeah,
and
this is not the only podcast in which this movie is discussed.
It's discussed, yes. And as a former number 1 draft pick in the Rock Docs Talking Heads draft. He's very good at talking about this movie. He's not just very good at making this movie, and talking about what he wants to do is very good as well. But I would say that the movie speaks pretty well for itself as well. I've been really interested in listening to his interviews talking about this movie, but he hasn't said anything in them that I was like, oh, I didn't quite pick up on that. Everything, it's like, yep, I saw that. I see your intent there. It was clearly expressed in the film. Yeah. So like one thing he's talked about a lot was feeling almost like a moral calling to correct the historical record and to do right by this event, to do right by the subjects, to do right by the American history that had this piece missing out of it. And that's clearly an intent of the film. At any point you're watching it, it's obvious that that's what he wants to do.
Right. And kind of going back to the top of this podcast, when I first watched this or started to watch it the first time, I was like, is this a rock doc in the sense that we talk about it? Meaning, like, is it primarily a concert film as opposed to a documentary? And you can argue about what that means. But the more I watch it, it's clear that this is a documentary. Like, there is a point of view. It's not just, hey, here's some kick-ass music, which there's plenty of that.
Yeah.
But, they really are telling a story, trying to make a point, etc., and using the music as one of the cinematic means of doing that.
Yeah, it's really impressive how he moves in and out of the performances and into the parts of the world at large that he wants to talk about at any given point. There's a long period where they talk about what was going on in fashion and culture in Black America at the time. There's a large portion where they talk about language, that the transition of using the word black as the primary descriptor for African American people. There's a lengthy period about the moon landing, as you talk about. And that one is really interesting because there's this newsreel that essentially did that news segment too, except it did it in the most condescending asshole way possible.
Right.
Like a sneering perspective about all these people, all these black people in a park who don't even care that the human race just landed on the moon.
Yeah, there was a news segment at the time.
Yeah.
So like the news was showing all the reactions of all these people, primarily white people, who were like totally stoked about the moon landing, and that was the reaction. And then so they sent somebody down to this park because the moon landing occurred literally during this festival. I guess literally during Stevie Wonder's set.
Yeah, somebody comes out to Stevie Wonder before this isn't said in the movie, but somebody, I think one of his band members comes up to him and tells him into his ear that they just landed on the moon. And Stevie apparently announced it to the crowd, but there was like booze and stuff.
Yeah. And so anyway, so this news reporter at the time went down and he's like, I'm here in Harlem at a music festival and let's see what people say. And basically people were like, people's reactions, the black attendees of the festival, at least the ones that were captured, their reactions were like, hey, that's primarily like, hey, that's great for the people that did it. And it's certainly a great accomplishment. Mm-hmm. But how about spending that money to feed people in Harlem because we could use it? That's basically the reaction, and so it's it really is kind of I would say trying to kind of like recontextualize a bunch of myths and things that have been built up about the time. That somebody who watches a lot of documentaries about the 60s, which certainly Questlove does, as do we, would just kind of like be told over and over again, like everybody was stoked about this. Yeah. That's not to say the moon landing sucked or was fake or whatever. Like you can litigate that yourself.
Imagine if this episode just broke out into like a straight up conspiracy. Like, first of all, that didn't even happen. So
listen, I was listening to Joe Rogan the other day.
I'm glad these festival attendees saw through that shit. But I mean, so like Gil Scott-Heron doesn't perform at this festival, but turns out he didn't need to have that right. sentiment expressed earnestly at the time.
Yeah, Whitey's on the moon.
Right. And so a couple things. One, I sort of said at the top that the news segment had a sort of sneering condescension about its about the reason it was posing that question to these festival attendees. And I didn't see the whole segment, so I guess it's possible that
It's taken out of context.
That it's or that the reporter who did that segment had a knowing sense that maybe people at this festival would have a useful perspective.
Right.
Maybe I'm not giving him enough credit.
Right. We don't know how it's framed.
We don't know how it's framed. But I will say everybody whose comments are included in this movie comes across really well. They have really smart comments like, why don't they send some of that money down here to Harlem? And then one very funny guy, his name is not included, or I would have had it, but I did write his quote down. Quote, "Black man gonna go to Africa, white man gonna go to the moon. I'm going to stay in Harlem with the Puerto Ricans and have me some fun." Then he rips the drag of his cigarette.
That's Red Fox.
Is that Red Fox?
Yeah, that's Red Fox.
They
don't put his name there.
He does. It does look like him now that you say it.
Oh, it's totally Red Fox.
Well, that explains the
there was
sheer
he was one of the comedians at the
element
yeah.
of it.
Yeah. So, and we're kind of jumping around here, but I think that's appropriate just because, like sometimes when we talk about these movies, we go kind of chronologically.
Yeah.
But this movie does not have a real chronological order.
No, I sort of thought it did the first time I watched it, like that they were moving through the like a day of the festival or part of the festival, but it's not at all. It's all of the performances are taken out of sequence, and Stevie Wonder performs at the beginning, and then Stevie Wonder performs at the end. So.
Right. And Questlove said, like, when he was putting this together, I mean, he was looking at it like he was he was putting together an album or a DJ set.
Right.
Like, meaning, he wants it to have a rhythm and a flow, as opposed to like, telling a specific story, like this happened and this happened. So it's not like, okay, the first weekend of the festival this happened and then this and then that.
Right.
That's, you don't get that at all, and it doesn't matter.
Right. He has everything he wants to get through, and he arranges it almost like curating is the word for it. He's curating this movie in the way he wants to tell it.
Yeah. So if it sounds like we're just kind of like randomly stumbling through the sequence of events here, I mean, it's just because the movie is not demanding anything else.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So, what else jumps out at you?
Well, so there's a handful of performers that really jump out. One really early, I think the Chambers Brothers performance is awesome.
Yeah. Early funk.
Yeah. Early funk, and just like awesome. I mean, just like
hitting hard.
Yeah, awesome, hitting hard. There's, I would say, 3 artists strike me as the main characters of this movie. And I would be interested in if you agree with this. And I think you don't. My guess is from things you've said. So the 3 performers who seem to get the most attention and who it seems like Questlove is most interested in telling the story of, to me, are Sly and the Family Stone.
Definitely. No doubt.
Nina Simone.
Yeah. She's the closer.
And Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
Now, I thought you were going to say Mavis.
Mavis to an extent.
Yeah.
But no, I think Stevie Wonder. I mean, the first musical thing you see is Stevie Wonder. So
playing the drums, a nice
right.
little nod for Questlove.
Yeah, and also just like, here's how awesome this is going to be. Like, we're starting with Stevie Wonder playing a drum solo and just tearing it up.
And that is like the first thing that happens, basically.
Yeah, and that's what I've told people about this movie, like, to see it. Like, it's like, listen, it starts with Stevie Wonder playing a great drum solo. They're like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
It just goes up from there.
Yeah, it's great.
So Stevie's at a transitional time.
Yes.
I mean, I guess we.
So let's talk
a lot
about
of these
Stevie
artists are. It's an interesting time in the music, right? So
and in the culture.
Yeah.
Like the whole premise of the movie is not contrived; it really holds. Right.
Right. Exactly. Stevie Wonder, of course, had been like this young teenage superstar. Little Stevie Wonder, he was first called, and he's had, most of his 60s hits, like For Once in My Life and those kind of songs. And he's in a position in his career where he's trying to figure out what his next move is going to be. He's watching other artists, take these social and political stances, which is really frowned upon at Motown. I mean, Stevie's like, 18, 19 at this time? 19, like, he's so young, but he's so mature.
Right.
And
he's already been in the industry for like 8 years.
Yeah. And been a superstar.
Right.
But he's at a point where he's trying to figure out his next move. So he's not doing in this, any of obviously the things that would come in the 70s. Like, he's not doing material from, Music of My Mind or something. Like, he's not there yet. But he's playing the clavinet organ, which is like, the sound that you hear in Superstition. That was like maybe the next year or two that came out. He's starting to find those sounds and kind of get into this, more funky groove type music.
Yeah.
Than like the tight little pop songs. And even in one of the songs that he sings, it's kind of just more like a groove rather than a composed song.
Yeah.
And at one point he says, do what Steveland tells you. And Steveland's his real name, right? So, like, he never dropped the Stevie Wonder name. His name is Steveland Morris. But he kind of throws his real name in there. And I think, maybe that's just, it fit the rhyme or whatever, but it also could just be, like, another way of him recapturing an adult identity.
Yeah. And we get recent interview footage of Stevie reflecting on the moment.
Yeah.
Which, by virtue of what happens in over 50 years of people's lives, we don't have that benefit for everybody who's in this
of course.
movie, right?
Sure.
So I was wondering when I was watching it, are they just going to leave it hanging there? What a perfect, like, pivot point moment this is for Stevie Wonder's career. Or are they going to remark upon it? And then Chris Rock comes in and basically just says more or less what you just said.
Except better.
Yeah. He says, was Stevie going to do the Temptations thing, which is singing their old 60s hits for the rest of time, or do something else? And no one knew at the time. And sure enough, he essentially reinvents the recording industry over the next 10 years,
He won so many Grammy Album of the Year that one year Paul Simon won, and he got up and is like, I'd like to thank Stevie Wonder for not releasing an album this year. Because like almost every year of the 70s, he won the Album of the Year, and it was also the best-selling Album of the Year, and he just kept knocking them out.
Yeah.
And also, every single one of those albums he dropped in the 70s is like the best thing of all time.
Yeah. Pick any one of those albums up if you happen to see it.
Yeah. Intervisions. You're not going to have a bad time.
Throwing hot takes around out here. Stevie Wonder's output in the 70s, good.
Yeah. So yeah, kind of building up to Sly and the Family Stone, which is kind of the center of the movie, I would say.
I would say so too.
Which
is, yes. And so this is what Questlove's making his next directorial project on.
Right. And
so obviously he likes this. He likes Sly.
Right. And he doesn't come out and say that this is the narrative, but really what happens is first you get, it's kind of like a Motown day, right? Mm-hmm. So you get David Ruffin comes out, and he's the lead singer from the Temptations who had recently left. Yeah. He's like, they're like, he's tall, dark, and handsome. Like, he comes out in this, tuxedo, and he
wool
is just...
suit.
Yeah.
In the dead of summer.
Yeah, exactly. A wool suit in August. And he is just charming as hell. Like, that voice is unmistakable.
Yeah.
But he's doing My Girl. It's kind of like a funk version of it a little bit, but he's doing a song from a few years ago.
And in terms of types of music that are easy to translate to a giant festival crowd.
Yeah.
Like, standing alone in front of a microphone singing My Girl is maybe the hardest thing to translate. Like with the Chambers Brothers, like you fall into a pocket. It's like going to a Fish concert.
Right. Yeah.
But like one guy up on the front of the stage, even if you're David Ruffin, don't get me wrong, he's as big a star as there is at this point.
Right.
But most Temptations shows weren't playing to a crowd of 60,000 people.
No, it was like a nightclub or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And this was David Ruffin, like, nobody knew that it was only downhill from here for that guy. Yeah. Like, he went solo. The solo, he had some hits, but it never really took off. His life became completely mired in drugs and other problems. I mean, he died at a very young age from, I think, a crack overdose. And, just a sad story. And, like, other Motown group artists shortly thereafter broke out, and Diana Ross became, a huge solo star, and Smokey Robinson, and, Gladys Knight, who comes up next. Like, he just, unfortunately, just the time wasn't right, or the material or something. It didn't, when you see him here, it's like, oh yeah, David Ruffin, like, the guy's got an incredible voice, and he's so charismatic, but this is it, and it's shocking to see him just because he's not a guy you see all the time, and then you get Gladys Knight and the Pips,
which is a really fun section of the movie.
It's first of all, they're doing Midnight Train to Georgia.
Yeah,
it's incredible. Obviously, there's nothing not to love about it.
Yeah, I mean, like, I have no notes on the music in any part of this movie, basically.
Yeah.
I have maybe one embarrassing critical take, but otherwise,
Okay.
it's like everything's good, right?
Yeah, sure, of course.
And we should say the style of the movie, really long film section. You get entire song performances for most of the time. Some of them are I mean, they're interspersed with interviews and whatnot, but you get to hear a whole song for the most part.
Oh yeah, super generous in terms of the amount of music. Now, one of the things I really like about this movie is they get some of the original concert goers, festival goers, to talk about their stories. So at this point, we get this guy Daryl Lewis, who's now like probably 70.
Yeah.
Like still youthful seeming.
Yeah.
And like great smile, charming guy.
Yeah.
Talking about what he this summer when he was like 18 or whatever, or coming back from college. And he was talking about how he and his boys, were at the show, and they were like suit and tie guys, and it's all talking about the fashion of the time, and how it was kind of transitioning from like, a guy, would want to be respectful and respectable, wearing a suit and tie, like those type of clothes.
And which they were modeling on Motown.
Yeah, exactly. Which Motown was the epitome of.
Yeah.
Transitioning into like the funk, Afrocentric style, dashikis, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So he's talking about how he loved the Temptations. And then you see the Gladys Knight and the Pips section, which is like the Pips are, wearing suits, doing the choreography, timing perfect, etc., Motown style. And that's incredible. Mm-hmm. And no knock on that. It's great. And then the next thing that happens is Sly and the Family Stone comes up. And this guy, Daryl, talks about how, like, he and his boys were there. They were like, okay, what's going on with Sly and the Family Stone? Their drummer's a white guy. Yeah. They've got, a woman playing the trumpet. Like, what's happening? It was not what they expected. They were kind of skeptical. And he's like, as soon as Sly hit the stage and the music started, like, we were no longer suit and tie guys. Yeah. They changed their whole style overnight. And the artists that had performed before, as great as they were, David Ruffin, Gladys Knight, and the Pips, immediately that style was passé in the eyes of these people. Right. At least from his perspective.
Which is awesome. It's great. And then I think also the way they contextualize who Sly is, you can see the reverence that Questlove holds him in. Right. They talk about how, which is true, that Sly was a revered radio DJ in San Francisco in like 65, 66, psychedelic era. Mm-hmm. And so he had this cachet that came from being like at the center of this hip San Francisco thing, a very white thing, but a very hip thing all the same. And there's white guys in the band, but then all of a sudden you hear him, and who gives a shit? Right. There's a female trumpeter, but once you hear her sing and once you hear her play, it's no big deal. It's like the consciously or subconsciously, it's like Sly and the Family Stone are breaking all these rules in what had up to that point been a somewhat like rule following music scene.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot.
Certainly a very segregated music scene,
sure.
And not just by having white people in the band, but just in terms of the sounds that they're playing with, the style of music they play, and how they're playing it, is breaking down the segregation.
Yeah, and the interesting twist on that is, like, what I read was that the one person who did not perform with this who wanted to was Jimi Hendrix.
It's fascinating, because I was wondering what was going on with Hendrix. Wow,
he does play at Woodstock.
He's like one of the only people that played well at Woodstock. Everybody else's sets were terrible.
Yeah, and one of the only non-white people at Woodstock.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Carlos Santana. There's others. Don't at me. Know. But Richie Havens. Yeah. We can go down the line. But it was a lot of white people.
A lot of white.
Bottom line. Yeah. And I guess what happened with Jimmy was that he wanted to play. And they basically said your music's not black enough.
Yeah, and so he played blues sets around Harlem during the weeks of this festival.
As like the after party.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, give me that documentary as well.
Yeah. Questlove, as long as you're taking requests.
Yes.
That's a good one.
Yes. Who's dropping in on Jimmy's blues, after parties, or the David Ruffin there jamming with you? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. I mean, there's just something that, and Questlove in a lot of his interviews has talked about this, that he has always sort of been forced to, even as a musician, to sort of code switch throughout his career.
Yeah.
That he would tour with hip-hop acts, he would tour with the White Stripes. And each of those crowds sort of expect something different out of them. And while that's true, I think it's also true that, like, each of those crowds also like the Roots.
Yeah.
And there's something about Sly that I sort of see that mapping onto. That Sly and the Family Stone had this, like, appeal that was genuinely cross-cultural.
Yeah. And there were...
and a sound that was cross-cultural.
Yeah, and it sounds like Jimmy, maybe... and there's others in this movie as well who we know were like artists who were black or people of color and were also becoming mainstream popular and specifically came here because they wanted to perform to a black audience and reclaim that position.
So Fifth Dimension is a very, very memorable section of this movie, I think.
That is the biggest rescue job in this movie, I would say.
Just like the reputation of Fifth Dimension.
Yeah. Big time.
Well, so one, their performance is awesome.
Yeah.
Their performance is like really lively and like you could and they are I think maybe the biggest band in the country at the time of this festival. They had the #1 hit on the charts for weeks.
Yeah.
Basically
for people who haven't seen this, or don't know who the Fifth Dimension is because they're not talked about a lot these days. I mean, they were hugely popular.
Yes,
they're a 5-person mixed gender black vocal group, like a pop vocal group that did like jazz and kind of light pop music and stuff from St. Louis. Their big hit was like, they did Up and Away in Our Beautiful Balloon, and then they did this like Age of Aquarius hair medley. That was just the biggest thing.
Right.
And
it was the first recording from the musical Hair.
Right. And like Hair also is kind of like forgotten, but it was a huge,
and
even
not
when I was a kid.
Well of.
I don't know if it was like looking to put on hair, but it was a big, even when I was a kid, I remember that still being a big deal. Hair and the Fifth Dimension, like Age of Aquarius, like that was classically AM radio pop.
The dude
easy
from Fifth
listening.
Dimension is like, man, everybody wanted to see Hair because they got naked.
Right. Yeah. So, but Questlove brings back to interview Billy Davis and Marilyn McCoo. Yeah. And Marilyn McCoo was super popular at the time. Yeah. She's like incredibly beautiful, very light-skinned, fair. Like their whole aesthetic, for better or worse, appealed to a mainstream pop white audience.
Yes.
Like, that's just what their deal was. And not that to knock on them. But I think at the time they were not necessarily seen, or later on, not necessarily seen as being black in the same way. Sly and the Family Stone were, or many of the other acts on the
Yeah,
on
as
the
much
bill.
as Sly could sort of cross and play to white crowds or black crowds, what she says is we were perceived as not being black enough for black crowds and not being white enough for white crowds, and they hated it.
Yeah.
And then people would hear him on the radio and not know that they were black.
Right.
And so she, but they show her the footage and she cries. She cries watching it.
Yeah, that's one of the best things.
It's a really sweet moment.
In the documentary, you see people today, contemporary, whatever, when they film this, watching the footage and just seeing themselves 50 years ago, like whether they're in the audience or performing. Yeah. And that's such a great thing that you never see in documentaries.
Yes.
What a every documentary should do this now.
Yes. It's a real genius stroke. There's them. What were we?
Well, we were talking about the kind of transition that Sly and the Family Stone represented in terms of the culture.
Right. Well, and so it would otherwise bounce to the end. I was going to say Nina Simone, but we should get through some more stuff. Well, so they use essentially, and they use each artist as an opportunity to talk about a different point that they want to bring up over that fits into this framework that we've discussed.
Yeah, and I think it's a credit. I think it's a credit to the movie that this is definitely a hangout rock doc where you can throw it on and it's just on in the background and there's great music and once in a while people are like, oh, that's killer. Look what Sly and the Family Stone are doing. But it does reward a deeper watch.
Oh, without question. And any one segment you can watch the musical segment and the broader cultural discussion that they want to have out of it.
Right.
And then
neither one steps on the other.
Yeah. So Ray Barretto they sort of use as an entry point to talk about the relationship between black people and Latino people in Harlem at the time. And that's when Lin-Manuel Miranda comes in.
And his dad.
And so they talk for a while, and they basically just say, look, this was Harlem. This is what it was. We just black people and Latino people.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of just like a segment of the movie that stands on its own.
Yeah.
And it's great.
But you know what else is interesting about the Ray Barretto section is
and he was a percussionist.
Yes.
It's just,
and they use it as an opportunity, and they're very efficient about this because they don't neglect. You might get the sense just hearing us talk so far that there's not much discussion of the music in particular, like particular notes about how they're playing. And that's not true at all, actually. They're like a lot of the segments, while they're talking about broader cultural themes, they find a way to very efficiently get in and offer music criticism about each different artist. And so, like, during the Ray Barretto section, they talk very specifically about the different way he played the drums and the different way other people could play the drums.
Right. They bring in Sheila E.
Yeah.
To talk about, her analysis of how Ray Barretto versus Mongo Santamaria are playing different kinds of percussion.
How they use
on
their
the same
hands.
Instrument, basically, more or less.
And, it's like you could see it having like a sort of tiresome transition period to, okay, how are we going to get in from Spanish Harlem into different drum techniques and move on to the next thing without it feeling too abrupt. But it doesn't. He's a really efficient filmmaker in terms of being able to flip that switch and get into something else without it feeling like you've been jolted to a new discussion.
Yeah. There are some things about the movie that I do feel like are really elegantly handled or understated. Like, early in the movie you see a performance from B.B. King. And there's not really a lot of context needed there. They're not like, well, blues came up from the people picking cotton. Like, you don't need to know that. You see B.B. King perform, you figure that out. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't need to be told that. The parts where I feel like I'm being told a little bit more than, than what's necessary is really the stuff about the civil rights movement, Dr. King, Jesse Jackson.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if you're watching this movie and you care about this context at all, you're going to know that like a year before this, Dr. King was shot. Right. Jesse Jackson's reminiscence about that day, while interesting on its own, and Jesse Jackson was at this festival. He spoke on stage. He was a part of it. So it's not, completely out of context, but it is. That part does feel like a little bit more of just a history lesson, which is not. There wasn't a lot told that we didn't already know.
Yeah. So he, Al Sharpton talks about whether you were going to be part of the nonviolent movement or the self-defense discussion. That's interesting, but yeah, for the most part, it's sort of well-traveled territory. But I will say that taking this, comparing to this to say like Woodstock, right? And so Woodstock, the film, is kind of a weird watch today.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not just a concert film in that it shows performances. It shows a bunch of stuff around like the festival grounds and whatnot. But it doesn't make any attempt at all to like say, here's what was going. I mean, it was made contemporaneously, so it's not. They don't say, well, you have to keep in mind, here's where music was in 1969, right, and like how weird it was to have an event like this, and all these people didn't play together that much. Some of them were meeting together for the first time.
Everybody knew that at the time.
Everyone knew that at the time
when the movie came out.
And by 20 years later, it's like. It's like explaining, like, well, the Bible is something that a lot of people really believe,
Right, exactly.
Right. But because this event had been sort of forgotten.
Yeah.
And we should have at some point get into that discussion. But since this movie had to some extent been forgotten, and since like the story of black culture, black popular culture, black joy hasn't been told over and over and over and over again the way the counterculture has, there's a value in putting all of that thought together in one document,
right,
that there is not for any document about the counterculture. Like, it would be so tedious to have a movie now that's like, I'm going to contextualize the countercultural 1960s for you. It's like,
right.
Yeah, no shit, I know.
Right.
But this isn't like that, and I think Questlove takes it as his part of his like assignment as to do right by this moment by putting all of that context in one place finally, as it should have been done so long ago.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I guess I could be saying I'm looking at this from the perspective of like, I've seen Eyes on the Prize series, and I've read all these books about the civil rights movement, and I've seen all these movies and documentaries and fictionalizations and everything else. So I don't need to be told about, the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis and all that stuff. I've seen that hotel, but that's my perspective, and I'm not necessarily the only audience here.
Right, and it's like if you tell every piece for a long time of a story for a long time, you sometimes miss your opportunity to tell the whole story at once. And that's sort of like the 60s for white people are like exhaustingly told over and over and over again. It would be tiresome to be like, I need to put all this in one 2-hour document. In fact, that's what like Forrest Gump tried to do, and it's like horrifying.
Not a rock doc.
Yeah. That's a rock doc that isn't a rock doc that is not a rock doc.
Well said.
Yeah. So, and I guess I just think that it's like to tell the story of this event and to say, and I'm gonna talk about everything that was going on in 1969, from the Shikis and the moon landing to the civil rights movement. No matter how many times you've heard the story about the civil rights movement, I want to put it next to all these other things too. I want it to have that context in one place.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
I can see that. Mm-hmm. And I think also it's just convenient fact that this festival featured so many different aspects of Black and people of color music, for lack of a better term, because when you check out whatever popular music from this time, 69, whether it's Sly and the Family Stone or Stevie Wonder, whatever it might be, like or you hear like, well, okay, it's all influenced by gospel and blues and R&B and this, that, and the other. That, you hear that, and everyone goes, yeah. But like, rarely is that all put together in a way that it really does make sense, right?
Yes.
So in the festival, there was like a gospel day. Yeah. And one thing they do emphasize about the festival is that this wasn't like just a bunch of 18-year-olds. Yeah. This was families. This was like little kids running around and, moms and dads and people, several people that are interviewed are like, oh yeah, I was coming home from college. Like, that was really making a point, I think, to say like, these people were, had a variety of different levels of education, and so in the Gospel Day piece of it, obviously is such a strong, important element in the Black community, and that music stands up and stands beside perfectly well in the flow. Yes. With the B.B. King Down and Dirty Blues and the Stevie Wonder funk and everything else you're getting.
Yeah. Early Chambers Brothers, early funk, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it all is of a piece. Yeah. It's distinct, but it definitely works. And I mean, you just get this incredibly great stuff with particularly with the Staples singers and then Mahalia Jackson.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so one part here is like Mavis Staples has this anecdote about her saying to her dad, "Well, I thought we were gospel," and she didn't even know that while that the music she was singing over top was him playing blues licks on his guitar.
Right.
And that she just thought that she was a gospel singer and that they were a gospel group, and it didn't really occur to her that like it wasn't. It's not just conceptual. It's not just this idea that like lots of music that started from Black people grew into different areas, but that even in their group they were a blues band and a gospel band at the same time,
right, without even necessarily knowing it.
Yeah. But then they do have this duet with her and Mahalia Jackson that is just awesome.
Right. Mahalia Jackson was like the queen of gospel at the time, an older woman by this point who just like really defined the genre. Whereas the Staples singers were much younger, kind of came from a different sort of tradition, like a little bit, more bluesy. Mm-hmm. And, at this point they were starting to have big pop hits. They were signed to Stax at this point, which was like a mainstream R&B label. That was kind of taking them in a direction that was a little bit outside of just the gospel realm. But they brought Mahalia Jackson on to perform, and I guess she told young Mavis Staples, like, Mahalia's not feeling so well today. I need some help. And basically, like, brought Mavis on to sing this hymn with her, and they kind of duet and trade off. And you see Mahalia just like,
she's like geeking out on how good Mavis is.
Yeah, and they're both the same way. Like, Mavis is like, says in the movie, like, this was the biggest thrill of my entire life.
Yeah.
Is being on stage in this big crowd with my hero, who's given back and forth with me,
and then very literally passing the mic to her.
Yes,
like
exactly.
The duet
the next
ends
generation.
with Mahalia handing her the mic, like, you finish this alone.
Yeah,
it's it's a real moment. It
is so good, so moving.
This is part of why I thought that between this whole segment of the conversation is why I thought you might say that Mavis is one of the main characters of the film.
Yeah, I mean, she is to an extent, but I do think, like, it's also a section, the gospel section stands on its own. And so there's some pieces like that, much like the Latin R&B section, that, like, are really strong and great, but they are of a piece, and they're not necessarily the central narrative of the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's right. And so... one thing I want to say, I just was glancing down at my notes. Man, Everyday People, when Sly and Family Stone play it in this section, like, that song is the definition of a song that goes, man. It is so good. And it's, like, been the part of so many commercials and jingles and bastardizations and
documentaries about the 60s or whatever.
But, like, you see it in that context and it's just like, oh, my God, what could a song have that this song doesn't have?
What more could you want?
What more could you want? Yeah.
I think maybe we kind of get into the, like, towards the end, the Nina Simone stuff, and we talk a little bit about the, like, mythology around the movie and the festival itself as well.
Okay. So let's get to Nina Simone, because Nina Simone gets, I don't know, I don't have a clock on it. She must get 10 or 15 minutes almost to herself at the end of the movie. Yeah. And rightfully so. You can, like, it almost actually feels like the energy of the crowd for her is different. Like, the crowd is, like, in awe of her.
Yeah.
And she's like, when she stops between songs and she, like, just, like, talks to the crowd and it just explains, like, what she's doing, what she's going to do. Mm-hmm. It's so commanding.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
After, like, we're watching this documentary, and there's, like, 90 minutes of these, like, superstars who just dominate the stage and are so charismatic and so powerful and have so much to say.
Yeah.
Musically, what otherwise. Then Nina Simone comes out, and it's, like, takes it to another level.
Yeah.
Because she's so commanding. She's, like, you're ready to, like, follow her to the gates of hell.
Yes. Yes.
She's taking no shit.
Right.
She's, like, explains the, like, concept behind the song Young, Gifted, and Black.
Right.
And just, like,
with, like, this
hammering the piano.
An incredible patience about, like, how you can talk to a crowd without losing a crowd.
Yeah.
Just with confidence.
Yeah, exactly. She's not afraid of, like, stumbling. Like,
right.
Yeah. I mean, she's such a confident person. I mean, Nina Simone was this unbelievably gifted piano player who, like,
and the way she play, like, physically, the way she plays the piano is so striking.
Yeah. Well, she wanted to be a classical piano player, and she could have been that. Like, if it was today, she would be, like, a big classical piano player.
Right.
And that's what she was trained to do. And then when she, like, went to, like, say, okay, well, I'm going to go to conservatory and be a classical piano player, they're like, nope, that's not happening. And, like, the rage of what she was denied, she basically was then, like, kind of forced to be, like, a jazz / R&B kind of artist, blues, whatever. And, she wanted to do music. And so she, she went with it, but she never went with it. Like, she found a way, like, you could put any song in front of her.
Yeah.
And she would find a way to turn that into a statement about, every single thing that she was trying to say about the world and, the pros and cons. And it wasn't all negative. It's not like all of her music is negative or harsh or anything like that.
Right.
But it's like, it's never boring. you know, there is always something to say. And every single note she plays on the piano is like forceful.
Forceful, yeah. And like, I don't know. Also, we mentioned this in an early episode, but like the practice at the time of popular artists covering other popular artists within like months of a song coming out, like "Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood" is covered by the Animals like 10 months after it's released by Nina Simone.
Sure, right, yeah.
You know, she says, that they have an older interview with her where she just says like, well, how can you be an artist and not speak and not reflect the times that you're in?
Right.
And, there's like a heavy underline on it. It's like, okay,
right.
Here is the point of the film.
We've summoned Nina Simone from the grave to tell us the point
about this
if you're
point.
not getting it.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, is that the last performance?
I think it's the
performance.
Right. It's the last performance. I mean, then you get kind of a wrap up, and then you hear the music. The Chambers Brothers do another song over the soundtrack.
Yeah. So I want to talk about this guy before we talk about the sort of critical reception of the movie and the
story about it.
So this guy Musa Jackson.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So good.
So he begins and ends the film.
Right.
He appears within it a few times. He is a big Fifth Dimension fan. He has like vivid memory of that the suits that they wore were creamsicle colored, and like sure enough, put on the film, they were creamsicle colored.
He claims this is the first memory of his life.
Yes.
He was 5 at the time.
Yeah, and so I don't know if you would pick up on like the craftsmanship of this by Questlove if on one watch. Maybe an especially astute viewer would. I only picked up on it when I watched the movie and then immediately started it over to watch it again. So the end of the movie is Musa Jackson bringing himself to tears that all of the footage that Questlove has shown him and asked him to reflect upon has validated this memory that it almost felt like the world took from him because this concert had been so forgotten. And that he sort of says like, I feel like I felt like I was crazy. And he starts crying, and you hear Questlove from behind the camera say, like, I'm starting to have an emotional reaction watching you have this reaction, that this earliest memory of yours was in fact real. That like he had begun questioning himself over the course of his life, whether it really was the case that this incredible concert happened. The first shot of the movie is Musa Jackson just before that.
Right.
They play whatever the footage is, and Musa Jackson has the unmistakable twinkle in his eye. And he's like, it's like he tries to respond and can't find the words and just has this visible reaction that I imagine is what came immediately before what we see at the end of the movie.
Right. Yeah.
And so Questlove begins us with Musa Jackson having his first childhood memory validated by this found footage.
Right.
And the movie ends by him reminding the world that he was not crazy all these years. This immense, amazing concert. Those some of the greatest musicians in the world in Harlem over 6 weekends that he went to with his family. That was real. That happened. He's not the crazy one. The rest of the world was the crazy ones.
Right. And the very last thing he says, the last thing he said in the movie, is he goes, and how beautiful it was.
Yes.
And then it's like cut.
Yeah.
Which is just like, what more are you going to say?
Mm-hmm.
It was just like, yeah. I mean, So, the story that's told right before that, as the movie's wrapping up, is basically like, okay, this festival went great. and nobody really looked back on it. We had this footage. We tried to, have the original kind of director there talking about how, like, well, we tried to, like, sell it and, like, make it into a movie or something, and nobody was interested in it, and so we just stuck it in a vault, and there it was. Which
is not exactly what happened.
Yeah, not quite true.
Yeah,
so this is the kind of filmmaking razzle-dazzle
yeah.
behind the thing.
Yeah, so this movie, or excuse me, not this movie, an hour special on this concert that included 4 or 5 different performances aired on CBS in the summer of 1969.
And something that aired on, like,
CBS network at that time. Yeah,
network TV channel in 1969 when there were like 3 channels.
Yeah,
was a big deal. Like a lot of people would see something like that.
It would be the biggest thing that aired in America today.
Right. Yeah. Like nothing on TV is getting that much viewership.
Right. And then they sold a different chunk of the performances to ABC in September.
Right.
So there were 2 one-hour specials that aired on major network TV of different portions of this festival from this exact footage that we see here.
Right.
So now, how much did it sort of lapse from public consciousness after that moment? That seems more true.
Yeah, I never heard about it.
And it certainly didn't ever become anything like Woodstock or Monterey Pop or Newport Folk Festival that like you couldn't avoid hearing about.
Yeah, and I think this is interesting.
You said you never knew of this.
No, I never knew of this.
I never
before.
knew of this festival either.
Yeah, I mean, I know that it turns out there was also
very clear about that. I never knew.
Yeah,
this.
There was a 50-year anniversary festival in 2019, which is probably right about when this movie was being made. So like, yeah, maybe people concurrently rediscovered it as they're making the movie. So that's not really, but I don't think that's interesting for the purpose of like being nitpicky and being like, I looked this up on the internet. It's interesting because
it's certainly true enough to give this movie shape and be in the realm of something that's like very much within his artistic purview.
Right. It's interesting only to say like the premise of the movie is like busting myths.
Yeah.
About this time.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, it's sort of creating another myth.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I don't think I would call it a myth if you like contextualize it around Woodstock.
Right. This just got blown out of the water by Woodstock.
Blown out of the water. And like, to some degree, it's like, it maybe feels like we're being nitpicky by saying, well, it wasn't totally forgotten. It was on TV. It's like, well, sure, but like compared to Woodstock.
Right.
Compare it to the space in the imagination of like Altamont.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah,
and I mean that's another thing I was thinking in terms of the myth making context.
Yeah.
Is one thing you don't get in this movie is any like excessive drinking, drug use, or sex.
Yes.
Like as far as you would tell from watching this movie, like whatever, over the course of 6 weeks, 100,000 or more people went to a concert. Young, old, everything in between, and like everybody was on their best behavior.
Yeah, and I actually saw or listened to an interview with Questlove where he said he compared that aspect to Woodstock, and he was just like, if you think about like the gate crashing, the amount of bad acid that went on, the number of people who died at Woodstock, like if that had happened here, what would have happened in that park in those weekends?
Right.
How would NYPD have responded? How would the world at large have responded? Would this have been forgotten like this? Would it have been valorized like Woodstock was?
Right. I just kind of felt like, boy, this is pretty squeaky clean.
Oh, totally. I mean, yeah.
There can't be that like, a lot of these people at this concert are 18 to 22.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, coming home from college.
Or about to get sent to Vietnam or whatever. Like, you're telling me they're not getting a little loose?
Yeah.
Like somebody had to, there has to be some misbehavior. That's not knocking the concert.
No.
And that's certainly not the subject of the movie. So I'm not...
Yeah, exactly. I don't actually need that footage. Like,
yeah.
And here's, just to be clear, we want to be documentary fact here. This guy got drunk.
Right.
Here's a drunk man.
I understand. We don't need the footnotes.
Yeah.
It's presenting a certain image of it that I think seems to be more or less accurate.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and so Questlove said that he like learned about this when he was like on tour in Tokyo in '97, and he saw footage from this festival, like at a bar in Tokyo, like some sort of, must have been like a very hip place that had like a record collector as an owner or something like that. And he assumed that like for this footage to be out there, pristine, and of performances that were that good that he wasn't aware of. Because, Questlove is, by any account, like a musical historian.
Yeah,
right?
an encyclopedia of music. Like, if there is footage in the world of any of these people performing at any point, he would be able to spot it a million miles away and be like, oh, yeah, that was, Nina Simone performing in, St. Louis in 1968. Like, he just knows this stuff so well and has studied it his whole life. Yeah. That for him not to see... that that it seems like that was so impactful to him to be like, wait a minute, here's footage of these people that I haven't seen. What is this? Yeah, and so that sort of, I haven't done as comprehensive a research review of this as I'd like, but that makes me pretty confident that this was not even like an obscure, obsessive, like favorite. It's not like there were like really hip people all over there being like, yeah, but you got to see the footage from from Harlem in '69. No, this wasn't like heavy metal parking lot where like if you're like, or even me, you had a tape of it, whatever 20 some years ago. Right. So it was pretty deep. And so I feel like that what we just described is enough to validate the idea that this was like basically forgotten by history. Even if it was true that in 1969 it was like seen by most of America. Right. So in terms of the critical reception of this movie, I don't know how much we need to talk about it. As we, as you're listening to this, you want to talk about Tony Lawrence real quick? Oh yeah, Tony Lawrence. Like we totally missed that. The person who put this whole thing together. The guy who puts this entire thing together, and is the MC, and like a great MC. He's like an awesome MC, and so it's probably not surprising to hear he was like a genuine performer. He had singles, a lounge act, in basically throughout the 60s, and so around like sounds like around 65, 66 he starts getting like really involved in like community activism. He becomes concerned with community politics and starts putting on these events thinking that they'll be very helpful. And he's still he's still a performer. He still has the charisma in front of an audience to go up and do this things. And you get a lot of Tony Lawrence in this movie. Like we're talking about like Sly, Nina Simone, Mavis, and Stevie Wonder as main characters. You get more Tony Lawrence than any of them. Oh yeah, by a lot. And he's really good. He's funny. He like sings and dances a little bit. They like do quick cuts of everything he was wearing. In the 6 weekends. It is amazing. Man, dude had some outfits. I mean, everybody in this entire movie looks great. Yes. Grandmas, little kids, Tony Lawrence, you name it, they all look great. They all look great. And so he apparently, after the experience in '69 with the director who sold this stuff to the two TV studios, he started to Hal Tulchin is the name of that director who appears in this movie. He died in like 2017, and Questlove has been very complimentary to him as being able to make this possible. He became skeptical of everybody that he thought he was getting grifted out of some money, basically. Had a falling out with everybody involved, including Hal Tulchin, and kind of bounced around for the rest of his life to the point that he is presumed dead, but no one knows how or where or when that may have happened. He's sort of a mystery right now. So, I didn't know that. Yeah, and the movie gives him no resolution. You would not know this from the movie. They do not discuss anything that happens after 1969 with Tony Lawrence, which was not like explicitly tragic. It's sort of just he stopped being any sort of star or even major success, really. But he was still alive into the 2000s. But it does appear, from what I read, I want to give somebody credit here. I read an article in a very well researched article
in a fanzine, the December 2021 issue of, it was called the Shadow Knows issue number 2, was the name of the fanzine. They went through his whole life, and yeah, he's presumed dead mysteriously.
Tony Lawrence, if you're listening to this,
dude,
come on, Rock Docs.
This is the moment. Yeah.
Don't take Questlove's call. Just come straight to us.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. I mean, in terms of critical reception of this movie, it's up for an Oscar, and that's not even debatable. Like, you know, it wasn't like people were like, "Oh, this piece of junk." Like, pretty much everybody's falling over it. Yeah. All of themselves in love with this movie.
I mean, it looks beautiful. It's cut beautifully. It tells an incredible story. It's like speaks to the political moment. It speaks to any political moment, basically between 1969 and now.
The music is like if you watch this movie and it's just on in the background, and you're not enjoying the music, you are dead.
Yes,
like you're just deceased. There's no way.
And it's interesting that they did this like 6 months after the movie released. They released the soundtrack.
Yeah, it's weird
separately.
Maybe it's a rights issue or something.
Could be, or maybe to time it with the Oscars.
Yeah, maybe
like a something the studio had up their sleeve to get another round of coverage for the Oscars. Maybe
but dial up the old soundtrack. Everything crushes.
It's so good. It really is so good. Like to the point that we like to do listening playlists to go along with each episode. No need in this case.
Yeah, no.
You should just go listen to that soundtrack.
Yes, just type in Summer of Love or Summer of Soul. And
we're not going to out-curate Questlove on this one.
No.
Or anybody.
Okay. So, I mean, come on. We always say, like, hey, if this is a movie that, you know, the person didn't know a lot about, but would you just recommend it as a movie to watch?
Yeah, unqualified.
Yeah, okay. Yes,
Easy
obviously.
one.
Next.
Easy one.
Next question.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say is I feel like this is like the first one we've done where it feels very much that like we're really watching like part 1 of a filmography.
Yeah, that's true.
Like Questlove is getting started on something right now.
Yeah.
Questlove the director like with like the man with a purpose to go correct the history of the story of American music that he knows better than just about anyone.
Yeah.
He's out to go do it. He's out to go do the damn thing right now.
Yeah.
And it's pretty exciting, I think. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, man. If that means he has to take a minute off of going bum behind Jimmy Fallon's jokes on the Tonight Show, hey, man.
That would be great. Also,
he's got a lot of options.
Now, it would be nice if The Roots released their latest album that they've been working on for like 7 years.
The Roots are great, man.
They really are. I'm sure I'm going to love that album. I mean, Questlove, he did an interview with Rolling Stone where he was basically just like, he's just too much of a perfectionist and they've just been going over the tracks. Like, and they just need to finish them. So maybe that happens this year. We could have a new Roots album this year. Maybe next year we get a Sly Family Stone documentary.
Questlove, if you're listening, finish up that album. Do it. Andy wants it.
I think I'm merely reacting to his own comments that the thing is done. In which case, let's hear it.
All right, that was Summer of Soul. Again, we are at Rock Dogs Pod. You know what to do with podcasts. Listen, enjoy, share the love. Watch Summer of Soul. Listen to the soundtrack. Respect to everybody involved. And thank you for listening to Rock Dogs.